Gerald, you've been here 2 years. You got any kind of plan? When are you thinking about moving out? He didn't look up from his plate when he said it. His voice wasn't angry. That's the part I keep coming back to. It was just tired. The way you sound when you've been holding something in for a long time and finally decide to let it go. My brother Clifford, 62 years old, sitting at his own dinner table, talking to me the same way you'd talk about a bill that was past due. The table went quiet. His wife Nadine looked down at her plate. I set the bread basket down. I folded my napkin. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Excuse me," I said. And I walked outside. My name is Gerald Hayward. I'm 67 years old, retired structural engineer, and that Tuesday night in March was the night everything changed. Let me back up, because context matters here. 3 years before that dinner, my wife Patricia passed away. 41 years together. She went in the morning, heart attack, no warning. I spent the next 6 months alone in our house in Tucson trying to figure out who I was without her. I cooked for one and couldn't finish the plate. I kept the TV on for noise. I drove to the hardware store on Saturdays out of habit and stood in the aisles not buying anything. Clifford called me that fall. We had always been close enough. The way brothers are when they've never had a serious falling out, but also never been the kind of close where you say the hard things. He called and said, "Gerald, you can't stay in that house alone. Come live with us. We've got the room." He sounded like he meant it. His voice was warm and certain, the voice of a man doing the right thing for his family. So I sold the house. Patricia and I had lived there for 22 years. We painted the kitchen together, planted the garden together, built the back patio with our own hands over one long summer. The day the keys changed hands, I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes. Nobody asked me how I was doing after the closing. I had $280,000 from the sale, plus my pension, plus Social Security. Enough to get by each month. Not enough to buy into the Scottsdale market without burning through everything I had. I moved into the guest room at the end of Clifford's hallway. It had one window that faced the neighbor's block wall. The house was a nice 4-bedroom in a quiet suburb of Scottsdale. Clifford worked in office management. Nadine ran her real estate business from a home office and a company car and a phone that never seemed to stop. They had 2 kids in the house, both teenagers, both polite enough when they wanted something. The place was well kept and well decorated and had the particular feel of a house where everything is in its right place and you're not quite sure where you fit. I told myself the first few months were just an adjustment. I cooked dinner twice a week. I fixed the drip irrigation in the backyard that had been broken for a year. I drove the kids to school when Nadine had early showings. I kept my door closed and my opinions to myself. But you can only tell yourself things for so long before the evidence catches up with you. There was the evening in October of that first year when I heard Nadine through the bedroom wall. She wasn't keeping her voice down, or maybe she didn't think I could hear from the hallway. "He eats our food, uses our utilities, takes up the guest room. What exactly is he contributing?" I stood in that hallway for a moment. Then I walked back to my room and closed the door quietly behind me. There was the Sunday the whole family went to brunch without mentioning it to me. I came downstairs at 10 in the morning to an empty kitchen and a note on the counter that said back by noon, leftovers in the fridge. Not a question, not an invitation. Just a fact, delivered to me like a message slipped under a door. There was the afternoon I came home from a walk and heard Clifford and Nadine talking in the kitchen. They stopped when I came through the side door. Nadine smiled at me with a warmth that had an off switch. Clifford poured himself more coffee and found something to look at through the window, and there was the other thing. The thing that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the day I moved in. 15 years ago, Clifford and Nadine were buying this house and came up $40,000 short at the closing. Clifford called me on a Thursday afternoon. He didn't ask directly. He explained the situation and then went quiet. I told him I'd wire the money that week. No contract, no paperwork, no conversation about a timeline. Patricia raised an eyebrow when I told her. I said, "That's what family does." In 2 full years of living under Clifford's roof, that money had never once been mentioned. The lottery ticket was an accident. I stopped at a gas station on Route 9 in February, coming back from a routine checkup. The machine was right there near the register. I bought one ticket the way I had maybe a dozen times in my life, with no real expectation attached to it. I slipped it into my coat pocket and forgot about it for 5 days. I found out I had won on a Monday morning. I was sitting alone at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a cup of instant coffee, everyone else already gone for the day. I checked the numbers once. Then again, then a third time. Then I sat very still and looked out through the sliding glass door at the backyard, at the pool cover pooling with the last of the winter rain. $89 million. I did not make a sound. I folded the ticket carefully and put it inside the back cover of an old structural engineering reference book I kept on the shelf in my room, and I said nothing to anyone. That was February. The dinner was March. After Clifford asked me when I was leaving, I went outside and sat in one of the patio chairs that nobody ever used. The backyard was cold. The sky over Scottsdale was that dark orange-gray you get on a clear desert evening. I sat out there for over an hour. I was not a man who fell apart easily. I had spent 40 years as a structural engineer calculating load tolerances, reviewing stress points, figuring out exactly how much weight a thing could carry before it gave way. You learn to stay level when the numbers are telling you something you don't want to hear, so I ran the numbers. I had already looked up the tax situation 2 weeks earlier, late at night on my phone. Federal tax on a lump sum lottery prize at my income level would leave me with approximately $52 million. I sat with that figure for a while. Then I thought about Clifford's question. No apology attached to it, no softening, just the flat, tired voice of a man who had been thinking the thing for a long time. I thought about Nadine through the bedroom wall. I thought about the $40,000 sitting out there somewhere with no paperwork and no mention. And I thought about what would happen if either of them found out about the money before I had my situation properly organized. That thought, specific and cold, was what moved me. I went inside, the kitchen was cleaned up, everyone in their rooms. No knock on my door to check on me. No, Gerald, you. All right, just quiet. I went to my room, got out the notepad I kept on the nightstand and wrote a list. Step 1, say nothing in this house. Not one word to anyone. Step 2, claim the prize through a trust before my name appears anywhere public. Step 3, establish full financial independence outside of Clifford's awareness. Step 4, find a home, my own. I looked at that list for a while. Then I circled step 4. I was awake by 5:30 the next morning. I showered, put on the gray jacket I wore for meetings, and came downstairs before anyone else was up. I made coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I searched for estate attorneys in Phoenix who specialized in financial privacy. By the time Nadine came downstairs at 7:30, I had 3 appointments booked under my name. She looked at me with a slightly startled expression, as if she expected me to still be in my room processing the night before. Morning, she said, poured her coffee, and left for the office without another word. I watched her go. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was back in my own skin. The attorney's name was Gloria Fenwick. She ran a boutique estate practice out of an office in Scottsdale, came recommended through a financial planning directory, and when I called, her assistant was professional and completely discreet. I told Clifford I had a doctor's appointment. First lie I'd told my brother in probably 20 years. I sat with that for a minute driving over, then decided I could live with it. Gloria's office was quiet and well organized. Good art on the walls, no television in the waiting room. When she came out to greet me, she shook my hand, looked at me directly, and said, "Mr. Hayward, you said on the phone this was sensitive. That means it stays in this room. Tell me what's happened." I laid it out in order. The lottery, the amount, my living situation, the 2 years, the dinner, the $40,000. I gave her the facts without adding color to them. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled a legal pad toward her. "First thing," she said. "Have you signed anything with the Lottery Commission? Given them your name anywhere?" "Nothing." "Good. Arizona allows winners to claim through a revocable living trust. Your name stays completely out of public record. We establish the entity first, then claim. I also want to talk about the loan to your brother. Do you have documentation of the transfer? Bank records from the wire? 15 years old, but they exist." She nodded. "Then we have something to work with on that front as well." I left her office 2 hours later with a folder of documents to review and a referral to a financial advisor named Leonard Beckman. Walking to my car, I noticed that the low-grade pressure I had been carrying in my chest for 2 years had shifted. Not gone, but different. The pressure of a man who has stopped waiting and started moving. Leonard Beckman was thorough and patient. We met 3 times over 2 weeks. He walked me through investment structures, tax implications, charitable giving options, and never once made me feel slow for asking basic questions. The trust was established under the name Hartwell Properties, LLC. Hartwell was Patricia's maiden name. Nobody in Clifford's house would connect that word to anything. The lottery was claimed quietly through the trust. The funds were routed into a private account at a bank on the other side of the city, a branch I had no prior history with. I was meticulous about my routines at home. Same breakfast, same grocery runs, same quiet man reading in the guest room after dinner, the same person they had always looked past. But things shift when you stop trying to disappear into the background. Nadine had sharp eyes, the kind that came from years of reading rooms and reading people in her line of work. She noticed I was going out more. She noticed the folder I had left briefly on the kitchen table before taking it back to my room. I heard her say something to Clifford one evening from the hallway. He's been having appointments. I saw what looked like legal documents on the table before he took them upstairs. Something is going on. Clifford said he'd ask me. He did the next morning. Casual and rehearsed. Gerald, Nadine mentioned you've had some appointments lately. Everything okay? Nothing medical, I hope. Everything's fine, I said. Just administrative things. You know how it is at my age. Paperwork never really stops. He let it go, or seemed to. That evening I noticed my room had been entered. I kept a habit from years of working on job sites, a thin line of dust along the edge of my top dresser drawer that I had not disturbed. The line was broken. Someone had tried to open it. I drove to a FedEx the next morning and had certified copies of every document in my folder couriered to Gloria's office for secure keeping. Then I did something I had been turning over in my mind for a few days. I left a document on my desk, face up, in plain sight. It looked like a financial account summary. The account number on it was not real. It was a number I had written myself on a template, plausible enough to pass a quick read. I left it there and went out for a walk. When I came back, the document had been moved a quarter inch and then replaced. Someone had read it. I now knew two things with certainty. My room was being searched, and Nadine was the one doing it. I called my daughter Sylvia in Oregon that evening from a coffee shop on the other side of town. I had been keeping her updated in pieces, not wanting to alarm her before I had everything arranged, but I told her enough. She called me back 2 days later. Her voice was careful and measured, the way it gets when she is keeping herself steady. Dad, Nadine reached out to me. She said she was worried about you and wanted to know whether you had come into any money recently. She asked if there were any accounts or financial changes she should be aware of. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know what she was talking about and that she should call you directly if she had questions. That's exactly right. Sylvia was quiet for a moment. Then, Dad, how much are we talking about? After taxes, $52 million. Silence then. Are you safe? Are the people you hired people you trust? I have a licensed estate attorney and a certified financial advisor. I'm buying a house. She let out a slow breath. Okay, that's all I need to know. What do you need from me? I had raised that girl right. The real estate agent was a woman named Carolyn Marsh who worked an area well outside Nadine's professional territory. I had been careful about that. One house on Dunmore Street had stayed in my mind since the first time Carolyn sent me the listing. 4 bedrooms, a covered front porch, a detached workshop in the back oak trees along the front yard. The kind of house that looked like it had been standing there long enough to have opinions about who belonged in it. The offer went in on a Wednesday. Full asking price, cash through the trust, clean and fast the way Gloria had advised. Carolyn called me while I was walking back from the pharmacy on the corner. Mr. Hayward, they accepted. We're in escrow. 30-day close. I stood on the sidewalk in the February sun and let that settle over me. Mine. I had not felt that word applied to a place since Tucson. I said nothing at home. I continued being the quiet man at the end of the hallway. But real estate transactions in Arizona are public record, and that was Nadine's industry. I would later learn that she had set up property alerts connected to my name and had been searching variations when nothing came up. She found the trust name through a contact at a networking event who knew Carolyn and had heard about a cash deal on Dunmore Street. Nadine came to my room on a Saturday morning without knocking. I was at my small writing desk when the door opened. She closed it behind her, stood in the center of the room, and said it directly. You bought a house. I turned from the desk. I've been looking for a place, a 4-bedroom on Dunmore Street. Cash transaction through a trust called Hartwell Properties. She crossed her arms. Where did the money come from, Gerald? I have savings. Clifford and I reviewed your finances after you moved in. You had enough to live on modestly. Not enough to buy in this market. I noticed that without reacting to it. Clifford and I reviewed your finances. As if that were a routine administrative task that required no permission from me. Things change, I said. Her eyes narrowed. She was doing the math. I watched her do it. Did you inherit something, an account we didn't know about? I set down my pen and looked at her steadily. Nadine, is there a reason you feel entitled to an accounting of my personal finances? The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Nadine was quiet for exactly the right amount of time. The silence of someone recalibrating, deciding which angle to come from next. We've supported you for 2 years, Gerald. We took you in when you had nowhere to go. I think that earns us some transparency. Took you in there, it was. 2 years of cooked dinners, fixed irrigation, school pickups, and quiet evenings in a room with a window facing a block wall, and the ledger in her mind read, We took him in. You have been very generous, I said. My voice was level, and I'm grateful. I'll be out of your home within the month. I turned back to my desk. She did not leave. If you've come into a significant amount of money, Clifford is your brother. He is your family. He has a right to know. There are estate considerations. tax implications you may not be thinking through on your own. I have an attorney and a financial advisor, I said without turning around, both very competent. Gerald, her voice had a harder edge now, the warmth fully gone. If you're managing assets without your family's knowledge and something happens to you, it creates serious legal complications. You should think about what that does to Clifford, to your grandchildren someday, to your relationship with Sylvia. I set down my pen. I stood up and turned to face her. I have thought about everything very carefully, I said. Thank you, she left. The door closed harder than it had opened. I sat back down and looked at my hands for a moment. They were steady. That surprised me a little. Clifford came to my room that evening. He sat on the edge of the guest bed, the narrow bed I had slept in for 2 years, and looked at the floor for a moment before looking up at me. Nadine's upset, he said. I noticed. Gerald, he paused. Is there something going on that we should know about? Financially? I mean, she says you were evasive, and it's got us both worried. Worried, that was the word he chose. I looked at my brother. I thought about the kid who used to trail behind me on our parents' property when we were young. Always 2 steps back, always watching to see what I would do before deciding what he would do. Some things don't change much. You don't need to worry about me, I said. I'm going to be fine. He waited. When I said nothing more, he nodded slowly and left. 3 days later, I drove to Dunmore Street alone and sat outside the house in my car for 15 minutes. The oak trees in the front yard were bare but solid, the kind of trees that had been there long enough that you knew they weren't going anywhere. The workshop in the back had a good roof. The porch had room for 2 chairs and a small table. I thought Patricia would have liked the garden space along the south side. I drove home and slept better than I had in months. The shift in the house started the Monday after Clifford's visit. Nadine made breakfast. This had not happened since my first week there, back when the welcome was still being performed. She made eggs and toast and fresh coffee and set a place at the table for me without being asked. She was wearing her good earrings and smiled at me with the full warmth of a woman who had decided to change her approach. Morning, Gerald, she said. Sit down, it's almost ready. Over the following week, I was invited along on errands, as if that had always been the custom. Clifford started coming home for dinner more consistently and directed more conversation toward me. He asked about my opinions on things, about projects I remembered from my career, about what Patricia had thought of places they had traveled. It was a well-run campaign. I recognized it because I had spent 40 years in a field where the most important skill was knowing when a structure was under load and which direction the pressure was coming from. They wanted to know about the money. They wanted to reposition themselves before I walked out the door. And if they could make me feel grateful enough or guilty enough or pulled back in by the warmth, maybe I would reconsider the house, the attorney, all of it. I was not cold to them. I received every breakfast and every question with genuine politeness, but I did not tell them anything. I also called Arthur Dunning. Arthur and I had known each other for 35 years, since we were both junior engineers on a job site in Phoenix back when neither of us had gray in our hair. He retired a couple of years before me and moved back to Tucson. When I told him everything, he listened for 40 minutes without interrupting. You're really doing it, he said when I finished. I'm really doing it. Good. His voice was steady and direct, the way it had always been on job sites when things needed to get done and someone had to say the thing clearly. You've been letting them manage you for 2 years. That's long enough. I told him about the $40,000. He was quiet for a moment. You're putting that in the disclosure at the family lunch? Gloria has already drafted the legal notice. They'll have it in their hands that day. Good, he said again. Then you need someone there when you move. I was going to ask, I'll drive up Friday. We'll do the walk-through together. That was the thing about 35 years of friendship. You didn't have to explain the full picture. The other person already understood the weight of what you were carrying and showed up anyway. The closing on Dunmore Street was confirmed for Thursday. The movers were booked for Saturday. I was 10 days from having a key in my hand that belonged to a door that was mine. They came together on Wednesday evening, 4 days before the move. I was in my room wrapping the framed photographs I kept on the windowsill. Patricia and me at the Grand Canyon the summer before she got sick. Sylvia at her nursing school graduation. A picture of Clifford and me as kids standing next to our father's truck, both of us squinting into the sun. I heard both sets of footsteps in the hallway before the knock. Clifford opened the door. Nadine stood slightly behind him, which was not her usual position. She generally entered rooms first. Can we come in? Clifford asked. Of course, I said. They sat on the edge of the guest bed, side by side. I took the desk chair and turned to face them. The packing box was half full behind me. Nadine spoke first. Gerald, we want to start by saying we're sorry. The way things have been handled, the dinner, all of it, it wasn't right. Clifford looked at me directly. I shouldn't have said what I said the way I said it. I know that. I waited. We've been thinking, Nadine continued, and here her voice shifted slightly from warm to careful. Everything has moved so fast. You found a house, you're already packing, it doesn't have to be like this. If you want more space here, we can convert the study. Or if you want your own place, we could help you look together. As a family, we know the market. We could make sure you end up somewhere safe and close by, safe and close. She wanted to know the address, she wanted to be part of the transaction. We just feel, Clifford said more quietly, that going through all of this alone with attorneys you've only just met, financial advisors we don't know. Mom, that's a lot to manage by yourself. We want to help. That's what family is for. I looked at my brother, then at Nadine. I thought about the drawer that had been opened. I thought about Nadine calling Sylvia to ask about my finances. I thought about took you in, an overhead cost, and Clifford and I reviewed your finances. All of it said with the ease of people who had never expected to be held accountable for any of it. I appreciate what you're saying. I said, both of you? Nadine leaned forward slightly. Gerald, if you've come into money, something significant, please don't make decisions in a vacuum. Clifford is your only brother. Think about what this does to the family. Think about your relationship with Sylvia, with any grandchildren down the road. There it was. Sylvia and I are in good shape, I said. That's not going to change. Then why are you doing all of this alone? Her voice had an edge now, wrapped carefully in concern. What has someone told you that made you feel like you need to hide things from us? I looked at her for a long moment. No one told me anything. I watched and I listened and I drew my own conclusions. I've been doing that for 67 years. I'm fairly good at it. I stood up from the desk chair. I have a licensed attorney. I have a financial advisor I trust. I have a friend of 35 years driving up Friday to help me move. I have a house on a street with oak trees and a workshop in the back. And the closing is in 48 hours. I looked at them both. I'm not a man who needs to be protected. I'm a man who needed to be treated with some basic respect. There's a difference. Nadine stood. Her jaw was tight. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. I can live with that. Clifford looked at me for a long moment. Something behind his eyes that I could not fully read. Not quite anger. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding, or at least the beginning of having to face something he had been looking away from for a long time. Then he followed his wife out of the room, the door closed. I sat back down. I picked up the photograph of Clifford and me as kids, squinting into the sun next to our father's truck. I had loved my brother for a long time. I still did. That part was not complicated. What was complicated was that love does not require you to make yourself invisible to keep someone else comfortable. I set the photograph into the packing box, face up, surrounded by newspaper. Then I went downstairs, made a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet for a while. The house on Dunmore Street smelled like old wood and something clean when Arthur and I walked through it Friday evening. He went through every room with his hands in his pockets, the way he used to walk a job site before signing off on a phase. It's solid, he said at the end. Good bones throughout. Coming from Arthur, that was high praise. We moved in on Saturday. By afternoon, the boxes were in the rooms where they belonged, and we sat on the front porch with coffee while the late March light went long across the oak trees. For the first time in 3 years, I exhaled completely. The family lunch Nadine organized the following Sunday was, as I had expected, a managed event. Her parents were there, her sister Tamara, 2 cousins. The table was warm and deliberate. She waited about 40 minutes before making her move. Addressing the table with the tone of a woman making a reluctant disclosure, she said she was worried about Gerald, that he had made significant financial decisions without consulting Clifford, that the family felt he might be receiving guidance from people he barely knew. I reached into my leather folder. Since we're being open, I said. Let me be open. I told the table everything. The lottery, the $52 million after taxes, the trust, the house, the attorney, the financial advisor. The room went completely still. Then I looked at Clifford and placed Gloria's legal notice in front of him. 15 years ago, I wired you $40,000 to help you close on this house. No contract, no timeline, because you were my brother. You have not mentioned that money in 2 years of living under your roof. This is a formal request for repayment. You have 90 days. Clifford's face went the color of someone who had just run out of places to look. I said a warm goodbye to the people at that table who had nothing to do with any of it, and I left. The $40,000 was repaid by wire transfer inside the 90-day window. No phone call with it, just the transfer and silence. Clifford called me in June. The conversation was careful and slow, 2 men finding new footing with each other. He apologized for the dinner. He said he had let Nadine take the lead on things he should have handled himself. He said he had been looking away from things he shouldn't have. At the end I said, Clifford, the door is not closed, but I'm not the man sitting quietly in that guest room anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be between equals. A long pause. Okay, he said quietly. We met for coffee the following month. It was a start. Norman Raines, my neighbor on Dunmore Street, a retired teacher about a year younger than me, came over the first Saturday with tomato seedlings from his garden. We spent the morning talking about soil and drip lines. He has been good company in the steady way that suits me. Sylvia flew in from Oregon in June. She walked through every room, and when she got to the workshop in the back, she turned around and said, "Dad, this is exactly right." She asked me carefully, not about the amount, not about what it meant for her, but whether I was okay and whether the people I trusted were people who deserved it. Yes, I told her, completely. She exhaled. Then that's all I need to know. I planted a garden that spring. Tomatoes, peppers, and the yellow marigolds Patricia always kept in our Tucson yard. The soil along the south side of the house was dark and deep. The oak trees in front threw good shade by mid-morning. I had a workshop. I had a porch. I had a house where the key in the lock was mine. If someone in your life has been treating you like a problem to be managed, hear this. You're not too old and it is not too late. Fear is useful for about 5 minutes. After that, it is just an excuse to stay in a room that was never yours to begin with. The $52 million was a door. Walking away from that dinner table was the key. What would you have done sitting at that table? I would genuinely like to know. Leave it in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, pass it along to someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening.